All right, perfect. Yes, I do live in Moscow, and I was there 2 days ago. It's a really long flight. Um, what I want to talk about today is over the past 10 years, but just the past few years, I've been going through this process and had a couple of really unique experiences. I'm not a healthcare professional, and I don't particularly like to talk about myself, but when I went to the Healing Journeys show in Seattle, it was the first time I had been somewhere where they were trying to deal with your brain and your spirit and your soul instead of medicines and operations and everybody segmented, and it was remarkable. So I decided if I had something interesting to say, I'd come, and I hope I have something interesting for you now. Just a little bit about my background. I'll do this quickly. I have a time minder who's going to remind me about this. Yep. I'm an international person. I've lived overseas for over 25 years, Russia, Czech Republic, Ukraine, and England. I'm a proud father of a 23-year-old daughter, just graduated from NYU last year. I'm also no longer paying that expensive tuition. I'm a business guy. I started out in computers, but over time I moved into marketing, sales, customer care, all very empathetic in terms of who you're dealing with and what you're talking about. And the last thing that's really important for this is I'm irreverent, and that's probably an understatement. I grew up a Lutheran. My family was very participatory. I did all the things I was told to do, but the downside was if you didn't do all the right stuff, you were going to go to hell. And so this hammer has always been over my head, and inside my head, this is me too. I'm introspective. There's a lot of input. I don't know if I take too much input or not enough. I'm confused because I can't answer the first question. I've been divorced twice, so I'm not a good role model for communications or relationships. And I'm totally overloaded. Just as Michael said, there's so much input, 4 or 5 email accounts, all of this stuff coming in all the time. I had to turn off the interrupt-driven stuff on my phone because I can't handle it. So as any business guy would do, I set up my life as a project. And, it started out and has actually gone on really well. High school, first car or first kiss, probably I like the car better. My first job out of college, I was in computers, and so you get paid a lot of money to do programming. It just worked out well. My daughter was born. I moved overseas. I've had a succession of really interesting, cool jobs, always on the edge. You deal with famous and infamous people. You're never quite sure what the future's going to bring. But then in 2005, I was accidentally diagnosed with prostate cancer. And it was an accident because I had no clue. I went to doctors. I got examined just like you're supposed to do. It turns out my doctor had really poor results 3 years earlier and didn't tell me about it. So I went into the doctor, and it was a really short female doctor, and I went in because I thought maybe I was having a problem with my head, and instead she said, well, that's not so bad, but she wanted to give me a DRI, which, a small female doctor, and I'm supposed to be there for my head. I'm going, yeah, okay, fine. But the outcome of that was she told me I had to come in the next day to talk to their head of oncology, which really is not a good thing. And I basically found out what prostate cancer looks like. It's like a gigantic atomic bomb in your body. And Each one of the cells are the same way, and they just keep going and going. For those who pay attention to prostate cancer numbers, my PSA was 29, my Gleason score was 3+4. I had, at that age, less than 1 in 100 chances of catching prostate cancer, so it's kind of like, holy cow, how did this happen? Well, on top of that, the doctors diagnosed it as terminal. In fact, I won a malpractice lawsuit, which, that's really cool, that's nice, but it's not very much money for the impact on your life. Basically you go around this, and I did all of these things, and I only did all those things because my chief oncologist said, "You're a pretty young guy, we should do anything to try to save your life." Otherwise, the surgeon thought surgery was the solution. The chemotherapist thought chemotherapy was the solution. Hormones, that was the solution. Radiation, that was the solution. All of the specialist doctors have their solution in mind. My oncologist, thank God, looked at it differently. Now, the thing I have down in the lower corner, which is important, is all of those things, of course, come with these side effects. And I need to read these because I want to read them quickly, because otherwise I feel sorry for myself and might start crying. But basically, your hair falls out, you occasionally reject chemo, you have weight loss, which isn't so bad, but then you have tremendous weight gain, incontinence, hot flashes, bright red head, sweating, mood swings, crying, no testosterone, no sexual interest, no performance participation in spite of a brain surgeon who grafted nerves from my foot into my pelvic region to help with that. Hardening of the veins, radiation burns, scarring internally in my stomach, and the beat goes on. So there's all this stuff that's going on, but the really, really important side effect was that while all of this is happening, I'm saying to myself, I've been a good person, generally speaking. I haven't done anything really bad. So God, why did you pick me for this? Why are you penalizing me? Remember, growing up, this is the hammer, and suddenly I'm trying to figure out why me? Well, there's not really too many answers for that. But one cool thing that came up was over time, I have some really good friends who do a lot of reading, and one of them tipped me off to a clinical trial that was going on at Johns Hopkins. And this was I put up this picture because it looks like the entrance to Men in Black. You go inside, and once you're inside, you go, oh, wow. But this is, rather unassuming. But the intent with cancer patients was to decrease psychological and physical distress. That's cool. Help people live more fully, better relationships, less anxiety and depression. That's cool. That's for the brain. There was a world-class psychologist, Bill Richards, who should have been a theologian, but decided to study psychotherapy and research of drugs like LSD, DBT, MDA, psilocybins on your head and your ability to how it impacts your spirituality. And then I'd like to mention it was free. Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with psilocybins, but you generally associate them with college, with wandering around out in a field somewhere, picking them, having farmers chase you away. You eat them later, you have a great time, and life goes on. And it was free. So I have a world-class psychologist. I have this really cool chemical, and it's all controlled, and it's free. Of course, I had to try it. This is the tools of the trade, and basically this slide is just, it was kind of strange and interesting, and it's documented in different places. If you go on Google and look at psilocybins and clinical trials and stuff like that. But it was a warm, comfortable room. There were pictures of Buddha and the Patola. There was a rose, which turned out would be a central figure in this process. Headphones, because they played outstanding music. Eye covers, because once you take psilocybins, you cover your eyes, you lay on the couch, and you think about things. And it was free. So the big question, did I get high? Was there any impact? It was a randomized study, which means in our case, we did it twice. First, to qualify, I had to go through a battery of questionnaires with these psychologists, which was also quite helpful. But then you got to do it 2 times. Once you were promised that it would be full strength, and the other time there were no promises. Could be nothing. Which unfortunately for me, the first time, that's how it turned out. I went through a very elaborate process. We had this chalice, which I didn't mention, but it's like an invocation. They take this very seriously. They want you to have a good experience and for you to discover something. But the first time for me, it was 4 hours laying on a couch listening to great music, which also wasn't bad. The second time was completely different. I went in, we went through the invocation. After about an hour, which is when it's supposed to kick in, I'm sitting there going, well, I wonder if this is going to work this time. Went into the bathroom for a toilet break, and these sterile white clinical bathrooms, fluorescent lights, tile walls, tile floors. I look at myself in the mirror and I go, oh, wow, you look interesting. And I have different colors, and I'm going, yeah, the fluorescent light's kind of weird in here. And then I felt the little tile floor under me in a wavy pattern, and I'm going, that can't be. So I got down on my hands and knees feeling the floor because I wanted to convince myself. Now, I've done tiling projects, and I know if you do tiling like that, you're probably going to get fired. I'm on the floor, and I just start laughing because I'm going, yeah, I guess it's working now. Went back in the room, and this is kind of the important part. Went in the room and talked to them for a few minutes, my minders, these 2 great psychologists. We talked and kind of loosened things up, focused on the rose, some other things. But then I'm laying there, and I start hallucinating great hallucinations, a couple in a row, and they're little stories, non-threatening, very vivid, very cool. But that was like the recreation part. Then one of my minders says, well, Fred, do you have any questions you want to ask us? And I say, no, actually, it's your experiment, and you want to know if this is impacting my relationship with God. You ask me the questions. So they started asking me, or started talking about a couple things, and we talked about my soon-to-be second ex-wife, because that hadn't been resolved yet. And we went through that, and these were things I knew deep down, so I thought, yeah, this is good science, but I probably would have figured this out, maybe drinking beer. But then we started talking about God, and he's going, Fred, are you mad at God? And I says, yeah, I'm pretty pissed off. And he says, well, yell, do something, just yell. And I'm going, nah, yelling is pointless. I've done this. I've done it by myself. I don't need to. So we started going back and forth about how could God have caused this and why God would have wanted to cause this. Somewhere along in this questioning, and this is probably 45 minutes, it's very emotional, very intense, it suddenly occurs to me, maybe I'm asking the wrong question. Throughout my life, I basically had looked at situations and, you kind of optimize things. You go, okay, I can do this, what's the best, what's the upside, what's the best path you can take? And I said that back to Bill. I says, maybe I'm asking the wrong question. Because basically when you say, why me, God, you're making yourself a victim. You have no control, no influence, and you don't do anything about it. When you say, what's the upside of this? It's optimistic, it's hopeful, and you think that you can do something about it. So this was the aha moment for me. Phenomenal. Now, the postscript is there any permanence to experiments like this? 6 months later, you go in for more interviews, and, you know, they occasionally keep up with me now. But what is the upside of this approach? And, you know, like Michael was saying, this is kind of completely different. I've tried Chinese medicine, by the way, and some other things as well, because I think you need to figure out the solutions yourself. But permanence is a big deal. I'm naive to say, oh yeah, God and I are great buddies now. I still have my days, but at least I remember that I should be looking at the problem differently. The reality of the situation, you know, the reality is, and this is kind of combined with the prognosis, right now it's been 10 years since this terminal diagnosis. Could come back. I know it's still in me because it's there every time I have these analysis every year. But the reality is I might have to do it again, hopefully not, probably something else. And the last thing is, again, the relationship to God, my spirituality. For me, I have to remember and stay focused on, it's up to me. So what's the upside is really up to me. That's the story. Now, just because, and everyone can have this stuff, I put in references because you always do stuff like that. But Bill Richards really is an exceptional person. John Hopkins has ongoing studies, and they do this for smoking cessation. They do it for a lot of different things. And, you know, you can go online, you can look at those if you're interested. And then this very last thing, I promise I'm done. The statement at the bottom, these are both from a Mother Jones article. Bloomberg also reported on this. But the statement at the bottom, psilocybin not only produces mystical experiences, but joy, happiness, and positive social effects. We all knew that in college, actually. The second statement, 61% of the volunteers considered this to be one of the most impactful religious experiences, spiritual experiences they've ever had, is really a telling thing. And I have to say it really impacted me as well. I don't think I talked to God, but I sure felt close, that there was something going on there. So that's it.